so that the recordings are available into the future. I'm assuming no one has any objection to that. Okay, good, great. So as we did last time when we had special guests, what I'd like to do is just take the agenda a little out of order so we can get our guests in and out because it's a full chunky day. So what I'll do, we're going to call to order. I'm going to hold approval of the minutes until after the presentation. Okay? Okay. So what I will always do though is just have everyone just very quickly just identify themselves so listeners will know who's on and that we're engaged here. And then we'll rock and roll with Director Raymond and Budget Director Bob Sinema. So I'll start. Dana Moore, Chair of the Local Control Advisory Board, and Ashia Parker can introduce herself.
Good morning, Ashia Parker. I'm co-chair. I will pass it to Adam.
Hi, Deputy Director of Office of Government Relations. Good to be here this morning. I will pass it to Mrs. Sinema.
Who are you passing to?
Bob Sinema.
Oh, okay.
Hey, good morning. My name is Bob Sinema. I'm the Budget Director for the city in the Department of Finance. And I'll pass it to Henry.
Yep. Good morning. I'm Henry Raymond, Director of Finance for the city.
How about, I see our Chief of Staff, Huber. Could he introduce himself? He might be muted. How about Natasha Mayhew?
Good morning, everyone. Natasha Mayhew, Director of the Mayor's Office of Government Relations, and I will pass it to Andy Smillian.
Good morning, Andy Smillian. I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff to Police Commissioner Harrison, and I serve as his proxy on this commission. And I don't know who else is, I just joined. Can I hand it off to Shantae if she hasn't been introduced?
Good morning, folks. Shantae Jackson, Director of the Mayor's Office of Safety and Engagement. I'll pass it over to Ray.
Good morning, everyone. Ray Kelly, Director of the Citizens Policing Project, and I'll pass it to Trey Murphy.
Good morning, everyone. Trey Murphy here. I work as the Director of Community Organizing for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and is a community resident of Baltimore. So I don't know who has gone yet, but the Lisa on.
I'm going to give you Lisa Walden.
Good morning, Lisa Walden. I am the Chief of the Police Legal Affairs Practice Group in the Law Department, and I don't believe we have yet heard from the solicitor.
Hi, Jim Shea, City Solicitor. I'll pass it on to Kaylin Young.
Good morning, Kaylin Young on this board as a community member. We'll pass it to Mark Washington.
Mark Washington, community member, Coldstream Homestead, Montebello.
And why don't we go to Stephanie Mavronis?
Hey, good morning, everyone. This is Stephanie Mavronis. I'm here as staff of the committee. Thank you all.
And I see that City Council President Nick Mosby has joined. I believe that's Mr. President.
Madam CEO, this is Nick Mosby, President of Baltimore City Council. I'm going to pass it on to Tyler Saley.
Good morning, everyone. Tyler Saley, Civilian Review Board. I will pass it on to Lauren Perez.
Good morning, everyone. Lauren Perez, Legislative Liaison in the Mayor's Office of Government Relations. I believe I can pass it on to Elliot.
Everybody, I'm Elliot Cohen. I'm standing in for Bob Cherry today as representative of FOP Lodge 3.
Fantastic. I see Elise is on. And I think
Good morning, Elise. Good morning, Elise Gillespie, Office of the Mayor, and staff to the committee.
I think thank you, Elise. Our last person might be Nikki Thompson.
Hi, Nikki Thompson, Director of Legislative Affairs for Council President Mosby. His alternate, but he is here.
Great. Is there anyone that needs to introduce themselves? Okay, so with that, Bob Seneme and Director Herman, Director Henry Raymond have been kind enough to give us a few minutes this morning to talk about the potential for budget impact by the City of Baltimore taking control of the police department. I don't want to steal their thunder. The bottom line is we think that there is not any negative fiscal impact, but I want you to hear that from them. Director Raymond has been the Director of Finance and with the City of Baltimore for some years and has an excellent large view of all matters related to the city's finance and budgeting in particular. Bob Seneme is our city's budget director. He is the one we fear the most at this time of year because we have to come to him to justify our budgets. He has lived with the Baltimore City Police Department's budget for a good while. He knows all the ins, the outs, the ups, the downs, the sideways, and it is he who has the greatest sense of what the fiscal impacts will be or could be. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Director Raymond, Director Seneme, and let them take us through their presentation. And again, thank you for being here this morning.
Okay, well, thank you and good morning. We have a brief PowerPoint presentation to share with you, and then we'll have some comments regarding fiscal impact of assuming control of the city, assuming control of BPD. So I guess at this time, I'll ask Bob Seneme to share a screen and walk through the brief PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you, Henry, and good morning to everybody. Can you guys just let me know when you can see the screen?
Yep, it's up.
Great. So again, our goal this morning is, since we're talking about fiscal impact, is first to just give you show you a couple slides about the police budget itself. The police budget gets a lot of attention, obviously, in Baltimore, and wanted to just show you some of the basics and some of the trends over the last couple of years, and then we'll come back later and talk a little bit about the fiscal impact. And to give the secret away, I should say from the start, we don't believe that there will be a significant fiscal impact with this change. I know previously you had heard from folks from our legal team explaining the liability side, which was the biggest concern for us, but they have explained hopefully to the group that there won't be an impact. And on the budget side, we don't expect so either. But first, let me walk you through just a couple points about the police budget overall. So first things first, important to know is that the police budget, this is the fiscal 22 budget, the year we're in, is $555.1 million. And what's most important about this, though, is that the lion's share of the money comes from the city's general fund. Local governments, police budgets, not just in Maryland, but throughout the United States, are basically seen as a local government function. So whatever we choose to spend on policing, it comes from the city budget. We do get a handful of state and federal grants and some private grants, which is that special funds, that 1% at the top. But again, the vast majority of the resources are coming from the city's general fund. That's not true for other services in the city budget. So things like schools, for example, the city contributes some money, the state contributes the lion's share of the money. A lot of social service type programs that we have, things like homeless services, employment development, housing, a lot of those resources come from the federal or state government. But on public safety, primarily the resources come from local government. And that's true not just for Baltimore City, but all jurisdictions in Maryland and largely throughout the United States as well. In terms of the police budget by service, so if you go to we put together a publication each year with a lot more detail where we go into each particular police service, which I would, certainly welcome folks to go find that. It's on our website, bbmr.org. baltimorecity.gov that goes through all the details. But in summary level, these are the services in the police department. You'll notice that by far the largest buckets of service delivery is police patrol and criminal investigations. So think of police patrol are the folks that the police officers that ride in a squad car, they respond to 911 service calls. And the criminal investigations unit is the one that follows up and investigates crimes and attempts to solve the case. So a large majority of our resources in the department go towards those two functions. You can see there's some other things in here. Compliance is the work around the consent decree. We have a crime lab and evidence control, of course, for the forensic science that goes on. A public integrity unit and a recruitment unit, and also some special operations, which are more, again, special units, things like the bomb unit, the SWAT team, Marine unit, and other functions like that that are more specialized for very particular situations. Probably the question that I hear the most from anybody about the police budget is, and police, and also to a lesser degree fire, is just why in general is police or public safety spending so high when we look at the budget. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, like I said, in the US and in Maryland, public safety is largely delegated to local government. So the local government, needs to spend what they believe is necessary for public safety. And there's limited availability from either federal or state sources. One other thing that might sound obvious, but is worth mentioning, is that staffing coverage for positions in a lot of our public safety agencies is required around the clock, 24 hours a day. I mean, when I get done my job at the end of the day, 5 o'clock or so, nobody comes and sits in my seat overnight. I can wait till tomorrow to solve certain issues. But in public safety, we're really doing 24-hour staffing coverage for a lot of our functions, whereas more civilian functions is only 8 hours a day. And so I think sometimes that gets lost, that just by the nature of the work, there's going to be more spending to cover the staff that's needed for that coverage. The third point is that minimum staffing levels are required in a public safety agency just to be able to respond to all the calls for service. So I showed you earlier that police patrol is a large chunk of our spending. We work with the police department to figure out how many patrol officers we need in each district to make sure that they can respond, as quickly as possible to service calls. And we get, last data I looked at, we get over 1 million calls for service a year, and roughly 2/3 of those require some kind of emergency assistance from either the police or fire department. And so you need enough resources to be able to respond appropriately to those calls. I should mention here that I know the city has, gone down the path already, which I think is good, of trying to figure out, are there certain calls for service that we don't need a police person or personnel to respond to, that we need either, mental health or health resource to respond? So the city is piloting ways that we can do that, but a vast majority of the calls, if there is an emergency, require some kind of police or fire response. And then the other thing influencing the size of the police budget is that, market salaries for police personnel tend to be a little bit higher than other laborers in our budget. So, from a market perspective, that's to compensate for some of the higher skill levels and the danger that's inherent in a job in a public safety world. So salaries and benefits for those folks tend to be a little bit higher. And again, that's a market condition. We have to respond and be able to pay our officers a reasonably competitive rate in order to attract the folks that we want to work for the city and to be in the police. Finally, I just want to mention a couple things that the city has done very aggressively over the past couple of years to try to bring the spending down in police and kind of recognize some efficiencies, knowing that there's other things that we want to invest in public safety. And I just use these as some examples. The current team in the police department under Commissioner Harrison's leadership has been very aggressive about, spending only what is necessary to meet their, to meet the demands. And I think they've done a really nice job of working with the budget office to find some of these efficiencies. And here are just a couple examples. We moved to either an on-call posture or in some cases eliminated some of our non-critical specialized units. So things like the mounted unit, aviation unit, which is the helicopters, the Marine unit that patrols the inner harbor and the bay, and other traffic related units. I mean, we determined that those only are needed at certain times. Years ago, we used to have those staffing in those departments around the clock, and we've been a lot more selective about only having those units available when we need them. And again, only doing the bare minimum we need to respond to those types of calls. The department has civilianized a bunch of administrative functions, so things like forensic science, fiscal services, human resources. There was a culture for a while in the police department that sometimes when people got done their service, that they could move to an easier role, something that's more administrative. And our feeling and the department's feeling is that sworn members, the folks that we hire, should be doing sworn functions, and the other kind of more administrative functions should be done by civilians. So we've moved a lot of patrol folks, back into the field, so to speak, and made sure that we hired, civilian employees for those roles, which they're better served to perform. Third, the department has rolled out a telephone reporting unit, and so trying to encourage citizens where if there's a non-critical crime, something that's very simple, like maybe a car break-in, for example, where you don't need an immediate response, you can call the department, report that crime, get all the paperwork and everything taken care of for insurance purposes, and then we don't have to free up an officer to respond to that and do all of that work. So again, that has led to some efficiencies. We changed in the last contract negotiation, we changed to a more efficient patrol schedule. So we used to have shifts that there was some overlap, and officers would come for 4 days a week on 10-hour shifts. Now we have more of a 5-day-a-week, 8-hour shift with minimal overlap. And what we found from doing the analysis on that is it really minimizes, wasted overlap hours with extra officers that might not be needed. And it also requires officers to make more annual appearances, which again is a savings to the city. Recently this year, we increased the reimbursement rate for use of city police officers. So we often have special events or private businesses that ask to use city police officers. We adjusted the rate upward to cover the full cost of those officers, which had not been adjusted for years. And again, making sure that we're getting, the right reimbursement for the use of those officers. And, combined, these efficiencies and some other things that have gone on have led to some dramatic improvements in overtime spending. So even just 2 years ago, at the end of fiscal 19, we had spent nearly $50 million on overtime. In fiscal 21, the year that just ended, we spent 36.4 million, which is almost a third, almost a 30% or so reduction over only a 2-year period. So again, really dramatic improvements because of some of the actions that the department has taken in partnership with our office and the mayor's office. So that's just the basics about the police department that I felt was important to share with the group today. On the local control issue, you've already heard from the legal team about the liability issues and why that should not be a concern. On the local control from a budget perspective, we don't think there will be a change because, as I mentioned before, local governments in Maryland pay for the police department. And even when the police department was and is a state agency, the city has always been the entity that funds those operations. And so I know there are some kind of other little legal issues and kind of administrative and human resource issues of why it's beneficial for us to take control. But we've always funded the department. We've always made those decisions. It's been at our discretion. Like I showed you earlier, we get very little to no state funding for the department. So shifting the department from a state agency legally to a local agency, we do not believe will have an impact on the city's budget. And with that, I'll pause and either take questions, or Dana, if there's anything else you wanted to highlight for the group.
No, thank you very, very much. I think it's, again, thank you for being here. I think it's clear that there's no fiscal impediment to our concept of taking local control. I do have just a couple questions, but for you, just asserting chair privilege. But first, I see that Senator Cory McCray has joined, so I want to welcome him. And I know that the legislative session has started, so we're really delighted that you are choosing to be here with us today.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So thank you. Just a couple questions. I mean, it's clear that there's not a direct impact. The one thing that we hear a lot about and it's been the subject of litigation. Is there any potential impact on the retirement benefits that accrue to members of BPD by us taking control?
Yeah,
I'll address that. We believe the answer is no. The BPD retirement system is administered and managed by the city of Baltimore. It's called the Fire and Police Pension System. So that is under the control of the city. Any reform efforts related to F&P retirement system would be initiated by the city, approved by the mayor and the city council.
Okay. Great. And I guess that would apply as well to any union negotiations in terms of compensation and benefits. Again, it's the city.
Yes. Just to clarify, all negotiations are between the police unions and the city through the Office of the Labor Commissioner, the Finance Department, and the Mayor's Office. So it's all and always has been local to the city of Baltimore.
Okay, great. My last question is whether or not there are any potential expenses associated with the process of taking local control that we should be mindful of, aware of, and maybe that's part of the legislative process we'll talk about later. But off the top of the head, is there anything we should be concerned about?
Yeah, we are not aware of any significant potential expenses. If there is, the assumption of the department moving to the city, and the finance department would be doing everything to minimize those expenses, minimize duplication and overlap in terms of administrative costs, to try to preserve the general fund to the extent that we can.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you.
So to be real clear, what I mean by that is we're not going to set up a separate finance department for BPD. We're not going to set up a separate new procurement system for BPD, because again, that would result in duplication of effort and additional expense. So wherever possible, we will continue to do what we presently do, which is centralization of those types of functions to minimize the cost to the city.
Understood. Okay, thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Madam Co-Chair Parker to see if she has any questions, and then we'll open it up. Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you both for your presentation. My question centered around transitional costs, and that's already been answered. So thank you both.
Okay, great. Are there any members of the board that have questions? I hesitate to say raise your hand because again, I can't see the hands raised, but I'll rely on Natasha and Elise to help me with that. Any hands raised?
No, I'm not seeing any hands raised at the moment.
Awesome. Oh,
yeah.
Director Raymond.
Yeah, I would just like to add, all of the costs related to BPD will be the responsibility of the city. I wanted to pay a note to, we've talked about the operating budget. Bob walked through patrol costs, etc. That's the operational side. The city also has always been responsible for BPD's infrastructure, the precinct buildings and the various facilities that BPD operations are housed in. The city will continue to be responsible for that. The state has never provided funding for those items. So not only operational, but infrastructure. There are many locations around the city where BPD units are housed. The city pays for it and will continue to pay for it. The state has never been involved or contributed to funding for that. You know, unless through a particular state grant. So I just wanted to share that. So it's not just the operational costs, it's also the infrastructure costs.
Okay. Great. Because I hadn't thought about the infrastructure, but
Yeah, all of the buildings and the precincts.
okay. Well, thank you for pointing that out. Much appreciated. Okay, so I'm not
Chair?
seeing. Yes?
Elliot Cohen has his hand raised.
Oh, okay. Mr. Cohen?
Thank you. One of the reasons for the transition is because the city council felt they couldn't have, certain control. Were any of those control limitations related to budget, like what money could be spent on? Understanding that the city was already spending the money, or were there any limitations because it was a state agency of how that money could be spent?
So I'll take a stab at that, and then I will, if there's someone else that has a little bit more insight. I don't think that was one of the drivers. I don't think financial concerns are what motivated the legislation. Senator McCray is on. He can answer. City Council President. I know that my deputy, Kaylin Young, is on. And of course, Natasha can talk about more sort of like the legislative intent. I don't want to go too deep into that, but I mean, fair question. And let's see if anyone else has a better thought on that. Why don't I go to Senator McCray first? Not sure that he's still on.
And just to clarify, I understand that wasn't the intent. I'm just wondering if there was an effect to that, even though it may not have been the main intent.
I'll take the question. Hey, Madam Chair, I'm here. I'm just going between two different things is what it is.
I got it, Senator, if you want me to take it.
All right, cool.
Yeah, Madam CEO, I think the question was specific to the ability for the city council to enact policies to effectuate change through legislation on the city council. And it was determined through a legal ruling back when the city council, I believe in 2015, no, more like 2014, attempted to require Baltimore City police officers to wear body cameras. And that law was ultimately passed, but the law department ultimately came and said that the city council was a state chartered agency, and that requirement needed to come through Annapolis from a legislative perspective as opposed to the city council. So what we're doing here as it relates to local control is trying to figure out from a legislative perspective what autonomy Baltimore City will have over the police department as it relates to the current quote unquote control that the state has on it. Now, in saying all that, specific to your question, that had absolutely nothing to do with the budget. So as you saw through Bob Senary's slide earlier, about 95% of the actual police budget comes from the city coffers, comes from the city's budget. It's not from state, it's not from the federal. So no, it had nothing to do with this budget process and what we're going on from a fiscal perspective. Is merely about the way that the state chartered the city, this entity called the Baltimore City Police Department. And what we're working through right now is trying to develop a process to gain local control for the local legislative body to have some level of autonomy in working with the administration to provide the operational authority over the police department.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. I think that answers the question, pretty thoroughly, completely. Is that helpful, Mr. Cohen?
Yeah, it sounds like there's no change in the way the money can be spent if we switch it. So thank you.
I think that's right. Thank you. Natasha, any other hands raised?
No, I do not see any other hands at this time.
Okay, so we're right at 10:32, and y'all are keeping me honest. I shared with Director Raymond and Director Sinema that I thought they would be we would be done by 10:30, so we're right there. Thank you, both of you again, and this is extremely helpful.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Take care.
So what I'd like to switch to now is approval of the minutes. So I just need a motion and then a second, and then we'll see if there's any discussion. Who would like to make the motion? I could,
I can make the motion.
okay, who is that? Who do we have?
Tyler Sally. Yeah.
All right. Tyler Sally has moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Ashia Parker, Co-Chair Parker seconds. Is there any discussion, any questions, any concerns about the draft minutes? So calling the question, it's been moved and seconded that the minutes of our last meeting be approved. Are there any objections to approval? Hearing none, our minutes are approved. I also saw Lauren Perez was on. I don't know if I acknowledged that already, but just note for the record that Lauren Perez is on. Our next meeting is set for January 28 at 10 a.m. And what I'm hoping we can do with that meeting is there's a good chance that we will have at least one person come and talk to us, authentically about different ways of structuring local control. Natasha has done a great job of connecting with the NLC, and they've given us several names. So stay tuned for specifics on that. And I'm really hoping that we can do that. It's time. We've been waiting. We're ready. So stay tuned for that. But what we absolutely will, I'm hoping we will do is have some discussion about both the mechanics and some of the concerns about the legislative process. I haven't reached out to who I would like to take a lead on that, but I will do that after this call. I think there's probably two people at least that we need to have guide us through that process. But what I'm looking for is some discussion about whether we need to do a fiscal impact statement. We've heard, foundationally that it doesn't look like there would not be any negative impact. But if we have to have a statement like that for the process, I want us to start getting that ready. I'm pretty sure we have to do an equity impact, wearing my equity hat. I know that that's something that the city council wants and likes and needs. And so, we will be bringing my staff in to advance that. But I also want to talk about the timing. We've had a lot of discussion back and forth about the timing, but we're now in the season where we have to have exquisites about timing and be sure that we're hitting all the marks in the world that I live in, early is on time is late is unacceptable. So what I would want to do, whatever our deadline is, I want us to be submitting our whatever, a week in advance so that there's no squishiness or squeeze, unease about that. We also have to talk about the committee structure. We are there. We've had our foundational meetings. I think we have one more foundational, which is really a deep dive into the legislative process. But then after that, we are absolutely needing to establish our committees and do work at the committee level. So hear this as a clarion call to, over the next week or so, think about not just what committees you feel we need, but what is the work that you feel called to do at a committee level. Keeping in mind that even as we break into committees, because of the work that we're charged to do and how we're charged to do it, the committees will be open. There will be several people that will lead the work, but will receive work and input from all of us. We will break off into committees. We will do our work at the committee level and then come back for decisions as a board. We have got to start our outreach. There's no capital in doing a legislative process without bringing in the people that will decide that process, which is the voters. So we have to start that. There's some folks on here as part of our board that are so good at that and are so good at the outreach and know where to go and who to go and how to listen and how to ask and how to learn. And y'all know who you are. I know who you are, but I'm going to ask that that absolutely be one of our committees. And there's a couple of you that will be reaching out to us to lead that effort. So, we're going to have to carve out the time for the 28th. Those are the highlights for me. We're still working to get other, not just the 3 people to talk about the different structures, but other jurisdictions to come and talk to us about their process and lessons learned. So I will tell you, we're going to take them as they come. If someone comes and says, I can do that on the 28th of January, we will fit them in. And we've been enjoying shorter meetings, but just want y'all to be prepared for longer meetings. We usually set aside 2 hours. Haven't had to do that, but that's that's where we're headed. So any comment, thought, suggestions about the way forward?
Madam Chair, Trey Murphy has his hand raised.
Okay. Oh, I see that little hand. Hey, Mr. Murphy.
Hello, Madam Chair, and board members. 2 things just on my end that impacted. One, you already sort of talked about the committee structure and the need for us to really clearly identify that, but I just want to echo and also make a request that if possible, if we could maybe have some conversation over the next 2 weeks around committee structures back and forth, maybe it's through email, because I know that we don't have another meeting scheduled until the 28th, or if the staff of the board has some capacity to maybe reach out to board members individually and collect thoughts on committee structure. I do know that we talked, and apologies for missing the last meeting, but I do know that we talked a few meetings ago around trying to make sure we had that structure in place by February. And so I'm a little anxious on the timeline, and would love for us to come in next week with a proposal that at least has some buy-in from board members that we may be ready to vote on. So that's one sort of just request for the staff of this board and also for the board members. In the second, I just lost the second thing, so I'll have to come back.
It'll find you. It'll come back. Yeah, it'll come back. Okay. Well, so can I just respond? I mean, I think that's a great idea. I'm open to it. With the staff support of, I see Ray Kelly has a question. We can do the conversations, whether we can get the whole group together. Honestly, I don't think we can get the whole group together because we have the open meetings concerns. And I don't ever want us to violate that, but I'm happy to encourage the conversations, whatever is going to be comfortable for folks to share. So it's a long way of saying, yes, we can do that. Ray Kelly.
So my comment wasn't really a question as much as a heads up. So we did get to talk to some community organizers in cities like St. Louis, for instance, and we want to ensure, even though we don't feel there'll be a fiscal impact with the transition, that we're also addressing things like IT and payroll systems and integration, or if that has to be. In my brain, I feel like that's already 100% city, but I think like in St. Louis, they had issues with getting patrol cars fixed and things like that after the transition, where we want to make sure we're in front of process as we kind of submit this language. And we don't really want those issues to come up while we're in that short window of the legislative process to get it passed.
A great observation.
Hey Dana, this is Elise. Can I offer something that I learned in speaking with somebody from St. Louis?
Sure.
So, one of the big differences between Baltimore and St. Louis is that when they absorbed the police department in the city, everything was already separately owned by the police department. So they had their own fleet services, they owned all their own buildings. So there was a very complicated process of transferring ownership, integrating IT, the payroll aspect that you mentioned, and that is not sort of a barrier for us because that's already all under the umbrella of city government and services. So we don't have that sort of mountain to climb as it relates to local control.
Right. And I just wanted to drop in that, and I don't want to put Solicitor Shea and Chief Walden on the spot, although I tend to do that at every meeting. With respect to the IT, that's a really important chunk of the consent decree. And, Judge Bradar has been, very, very clear about the IT aspects of the police department, and that the systems be upgraded and, modernized. And so there's been a lot of attention on that, a lot of focus. There's been a lot of collaboration and agreement between the police department and the Baltimore City Information Technology. The deliverable that's important for us is, exactly what Elise alluded to and what Ray is concerned about right now. And those systems are owned by the city of Baltimore. We control them, and that integration, it's already happened. So that's pretty good. The payroll systems, again, I can be corrected, but I believe that all of the payroll now runs through the city of Baltimore. All of the BPD, all of the employees are city of Baltimore employees. They use the Department of Human Resources for their needs. Obviously, the union and labor issues are run by the city of Baltimore through the Office of the Labor Commissioner. There are probably some employees that are on contract that I would not think that the taking local control would impact those contracts. But I get the concern, and kind of where we all are is we don't want any surprises, right? We're not in a place where we want to be surprised. So I'm really appreciative that you raised it, and we will go back to our budget folks and ask for that refinement and clarification, and just share it out. Just share it out at the next meeting. I won't invite them to come back. I don't think they need to. Okay. Natasha, were you going to add something?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, kind of following from Elisa's statements and actually Council President Mosby's statements a little earlier. I think one way to think about all of this is that while the Baltimore Police Department is under state law as a state agency, like a very simple way to think about this is under that state law, the commissioner, the police commissioner, and the mayor do have significant administrative and fiscal control over the police department. So as Council President Mosby was explaining a bit earlier, the central focus of a lot of this, different from St. Louis, is that our goal, our main priority here is seeing through ensuring the council has some say over the police department, which they do not have now. And I think that clarifies a lot of why there isn't so much fiscal impact. It's because on paper and the way it's set up, the city has control, as in the mayor and commissioner oversee all the operations, and as was described from the previous presenters, we pay all the costs for the police department now. But the key focus here is on the council's ability to put forward legislation for those body cameras, other things like that.
Okay, great. Any other, Elisa and Natasha, I really would love for there to be a presentation by the folks from St. Louis, if we could make that happen. they are the ones that I think of, the most, that could be, really helpful to us. So I would love it if we could bring someone in who was part of that process. We are at 10:48. Madam Co-Chair, anything that you would like us to consider? Anything to drop into the conversation? No pressure.
No.
Okay. All right. We've got really about 12 minutes. Are there any other concerns from any member of the board that you want to raise before we move to closure? Ray took his hand down. Okay, so we are ready to close it. I just thought that I would, as Monday is a holiday, we're expecting, potentially a lot of snow Sunday night into Monday morning, but it'll still be the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. And it is a day of service. Mayor Scott has planned a day of service where members of the city leadership, city administration are invited to help pack test kits and masks for Baltimore City schools. And that's a level of partnership that I really respect, and it's how we all make for a better Baltimore. But as I was thinking about Dr. Martin Luther King, one of the things that just came to my mind this morning is one of the things that he's often quoted for, and it comes from the letter that he wrote when he was incarcerated in the Birmingham jail. And it's I just would lift this up for everyone's reading. You can Google it, just look for Martin Luther King Jr. letter from the Birmingham City Jail. And the quote is, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And it's a really powerful, it's one sentence, just a few words, but extremely powerful. And really, it's something that I think can inform our work here. What we are striving to do is to make for a better Baltimore by Baltimore no longer being the only jurisdiction that doesn't have control over its police department. And the thought is that by having control of our police department, we can work together and more collaboratively and strongly to make sure that there are no injustices there. But we see injustice in so many things that we experience as we navigate not just Baltimore City and the state of Maryland, but life. And one of the things I feel we're empowered to do is to speak out against injustice. And I know that many, if not all of you here on this board and those are in attendance, you're justice fighters. You do that every single day. And I keep looking at Ray. And Ray, I know your heart. And Ashia, I know your heart. And Natasha, I know your heart. And Stephanie, even in the little quiet posts that you do on social media, I see you fighting for justice. So we have justice warriors here. Please think about that quote as we go through our next days and as we continue to do this work together. I want to thank you for being here today. I want to thank you for all that you've done already. We've got a lot ahead for 2022, and we're ready. So with that, I thank you. Let's go out and make justice.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good day, everyone.
A good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone have a good day.
Have a great day, everyone.
Take care, everyone.